We'd get together. There we go. Yeah, Paul and I would get together and talk about crazy, obscure things. We just whatever. So we're doing a tribute today to Paul, to my best friend Paul Gray, and his life and ministry and the way he affected us. And so we're all giving different aspects of how he affected our lives. So. Am I on a dark screen?
No, but just the from your mustache up is showing.
Well, we're getting ready to leave, and so I'm kind of moving around. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'll be in and out of the picture. So I carry on. Paul was really important to me. He would always tell me and everybody else. He said, God brought JL to our church for him to teach me faith, and for me to teach him grace. And I feel like we rubbed off on each other somewhat, and it was a good thing. Iron sharpens iron, and that's how we were, I think. So I appreciated him greatly. So somebody else.
Should I leave the pictures up or go ahead and switch them off?
Well, I don't care, whatever anybody else wants to do.
I'm okay with switching them off.
Okay.
Yeah. That way we can see each other talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stanley.
Yes. Paul Gray is the most joyful person I have ever met. And notice I use the present tense is, because the reality is that our existence does not just begin and end here. We are continuing on through eternity. Paul's way was just, to sum it up in a word, joyful. That's the word that I think of in regards to Paul. And I sometimes think about how I even came in contact with Paul. I was watching a video by a pastor in Cameroon named Dr. Sean Smith. And that's how I came in contact with, what's the guy's name in Ranny Childress. And he mentioned about Paul and the book and the course Pure Life Walker. And that I signed up for that as soon as it was available next. And that's how I first came in contact with Paul. And at the end of the course, he mentioned, we've got this group that's meeting on Sundays and you're welcome to participate. And so I did. And as they say, the rest is history.
I'm reminded that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Yes.
Talk about a time to get your trumpet out. I mean, I reviewed a book by Mo Thomas 2.5, 3 years ago, and Mo posted my reviews. Good book, and I liked it. And on Christmas Eve of that year, I got a PM from a guy named Paul Gray. And he said, "You're in Lawrence, Kansas?" He said, "I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and you and I are reviewing Mo Thomas's book, and he's in Detroit." So we connected by phone pretty quickly. And I'm the newcomer here. I mean, I think I'm probably the one with the least time, but I told Kitsy the other day, as you find out about Paul Gray, his contributions to the kingdom and to people's lives, it's like peeling an onion. There's just layer after layer after layer after layer of it, most of which you may never know about because he never tried to be the front man. He just, like any great musician, you got together with a bunch of people and you got a tune, and you kind of agreed on the chord structure and agreed on the rhythm, and then everybody starts trying to make everybody else sound good with the ultimate goal of making that song sound good. And Paul's life was a song. And he was the kind of guy that attracted great players because he was a great player. And when he got the great players together, they kind of decided on what key they wanted to play in and what tempo they wanted to do. And then Paul stepped back and played pretty little solos and fills and made everybody else sound good. Doesn't get any better than that, people. It doesn't get any better than that. It's the kind of guy he was. It's the kind of guy he is. Witness what we're doing right now. We're a very logical extension right now of Paul, right here. So if you want just a little vice in your life, it's okay to envy a little bit because Paul's absent from the body, but he's present with the Lord.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, I missed the first bit. So are we just sharing how we got to know Paul? Is that right? So I think must have been Googling Baxter Kruger interviews, and I came across their one, and it was just wonderful. And I think I commented something, and he said, "Oh, Paul said, thank you so much." And then I watched another video, and Paul said, "Oh, thank you so much for watching." And then I came across him playing the valve trombone with, I think it was All the Things You Are was the song. But he said it was All the Things He Is. And so he would play and he'd do like an amazing solo. And then he would just riff, just saying how good God is and how much he loves us. And then he'd play again. And so I'd had a couple of months of just commenting, "Thank you so much. These are so helpful." And he wouldn't have known this. But the week I'd been in a Zoom group with Keith Giles called Square One, and they were my community for over a year. And Paul wouldn't have known this, but the course had come to an end. And I can remember saying to God, "What am I going to do now? I've got no community. I'm doing this, rethinking my faith on my own." And again, I just commented on one of the videos saying that was so helpful. Thank you so much. And Paul, for the first time, said, "Hey, are you free Sundays? Do you want to join?" And he wouldn't have known that the day before I'd said to God, "What am I going to do? I feel totally bereft." And I think that just kind of sums Paul up, just naturally prophetic and hearing God's voice. And I was so fearful about rethinking my faith. I lost all my friends. I lost my church. I haven't been able to tell my family. And so these topics of rethinking hell and the atonement were scary for me. And Paul had this way of making you feel so calm and at ease. He was so confident in this is who God is, that it kind of translated to me of going, I'm not a heretic. I'm not going down the wrong path. look at this man who is at total peace and serenity with these new beliefs that I think I'm so scared of. He just put you at ease. And I went back the other day to his, on YouTube, you can go oldest to newest of videos. And he has got video after video after video. And some of the early ones only have like 5 or 6 views. And yet that didn't deter Paul. I feel like he was on a mission to just get this ministry out there. We've got videos for the rest of our lives if we want them. If you go back oldest to newest on YouTube, you can start right at the beginning. And anytime I need a pick me up and I need to hear his voice of like, okay, I need to just have a bit of like, when I'm slipping into old ways of thinking with an angry God, I just go, honestly, oldest to newest, and I can listen to Paul just telling me how good God is over and over and over. And he kind of changes the theme a little bit, but we are so lucky, the wealth of material he put out, books, and those YouTube videos are a gold mine. So I really encourage you, especially the new ones, go back, go right to the beginning, especially hear him play the valve trombone. This guy was insanely talented and also the most phenomenal ministry leader. So I feel very lucky that I got to spend even just a couple of months under his care.
Right. It's fine for me to speak. Does anybody else want to speak still? Right. I found out 1 or 2 months ago that I came to the our fellowship group, online fellowship group, about a month after Joe came, and well, I heard a message, but where Paul was speaking to, I can't remember who it was, but he mentioned that his book called Grace to All, which is this one here. I heard about it, and he mentioned what it was all about. And so when I got it in the mailbox, I actually noticed there was all phone numbers of people in different parts of mainly the USA and a few 1 or 2 other places. So I thought I can just go and phone people. So I thought, this is great. And well, I thought the first person I'm going to give a phone call is Paul. And he actually asked me exactly the same thing as he did to Joe. And I had been I had kind of heard the grace message about 2018 through various writers I've mentioned before. But I was actually ignored by quite a few people and was even put off 2 different, I think they call them blog posts or so. I just had my information wiped off. So I thought, well, I hope they don't wipe me off the grace message either, because, I just don't know what to expect. But I felt very at home. What I really loved about Paul, I would say, it is the fact that he was willing to speak to me privately. You gave me a personal chat face-to-face on video, but also phoned him about 2 times from my telephone. And when I heard that he'd passed away, it was a shock for me, because I'd shared a lot of personal information. So it was very painful process for about a week, maybe 2. And I hardly knew him. I mean, I just knew him by 3 conversations on face-to-face. So, yeah, I really am so grateful that he actually put out a book where I could contact various people. So I felt that he had really opened up my loneliness that I had for probably the last 4 years before I met him. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. Yeah, Moshe, I think you can speak. Put your mic off. You got your mic is on.
There we go. I got it. I guess I met Paul when in high school because he was Jay's dad, and we were all in band together. And then later, he became our pastor. And Paul could always. So I've heard that joy and grief are the two most vulnerable human emotions and the hardest to deal with. But he could step into those with people he loved. When Nick and I lost our son, he was there helping us put together the funeral arrangements, and then in our joy, he helped us financially and spiritually welcome our daughter from China. And he never shied away from any of those harder things. And he was always encouraging, and he was just wonderful to know.
I'd like to share a little something that a memory that was brought back when Philip talked about how he had reached out to several people and he was ignored, and then Paul befriended him. Well, years ago in our church, Paul was one of multiple pastors that received an email from a doctor in California. The doctor and his wife were moving, and a little boy were moving back to the Lawrence area so they could be closer to her family. And the doctor in California had a mobile medical unit where he would go to impoverished areas and care for people. And he wanted to do something similar here in Lawrence. And Paul says Paul was the only pastor that wrote back to him. Dennis wanted to do this with a church, wanted to pair up with a church and do this. And Paul was the only one that responded to him. Well, they did start they call it the Heartland Medical Clinic in our church. And it was just Paul and Dennis and then a male nurse. And the three of them started, and then it moved to another place, and just all kinds of wonderful things happened. I'm going to just tell you where it is right now. Paul did stop being involved with it several years ago, and now Heartland Medical Clinic is. Do they still call it medical clinic, Melissa? Or whatever.
Heartland Health.
Heartland Health. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. It is now this amazing place where people, you don't have to have insurance. They care for you. They have an amazing pharmacy there. It's its own building, and it serves so many people in the community. And it's all because all got started with Paul's reaching back to the doctor that had reached out to him. Well, it started that way, but the Lord knew what was going on. The Lord really took it to where it is now. I know that.
Our daughter works there, Kitsy.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
it's an amazing place because it ministers to the body, the physical body of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an amazing deal. By the way, they're getting ready to build another building. So it just continues to.
Tell us more about that. What do you mean another building?
I mean,
in the same.
Well, they had a building over on about 7th or 8th Street, and then they several years ago acquired a building down on 6th Street where that big rental place had been. I think if I remember right, Paul told me it was 8,000 square feet or something. So that's the primary clinic. They also acquired the Panda building, which is up kind of behind, and that's where Rhonda works. That's where they do their pediatrics and and have a lot of medical records and things there. But they're also now starting to build another building adjacent to the building down on 6th Street.
I didn't know that.
It's the reason to talk about it is it's just a perfect example of Paul.
Mm,
Paul's like Johnny Appleseed, man. I mean, he's going around planting trees that he may not even sit in the shade of, but the trees grow. And
yeah.
this one's really branching out. It's really,
Yeah.
and we could find his basketball thing that he put together where the alums
Oh,
come
right.
in and
Right.
play basketball and raise money. That, you know, there's another thing about Paul. Paul gets it started, it gets going. Paul
Mhm.
sees that it's working. He says, "I'm taking somebody else's chair." He walks out of the room. They don't need it. He needs to go start something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he never got tied down to anything. Jesus
Right.
did things that way. Jesus didn't stick around.
Right.
Jesus got it started and then said, "Guys, go do this. I got other stuff to do."
Yeah.
And that's so
That
indicative of Paul.
that basketball thing was started because I don't know if you all know that Jody lost her husband Brandon to cancer 14 plus years ago, and so Paul contacted one of the guys up at KU, an influential person, and actually he wasn't at KU then, but anyway, they decided, the two of them decided they would do a basketball benefit thing where they'd bring back KU players, basketball players, and they'd play each other. And that's been going on ever since. And they've raised millions of dollars for children who have cancer. And it's just an amazing event. And Bob, you're exactly right. You know, what you said about starting things and turning them over and let somebody else continue.
And not take the credit.
And right.
Yeah. It was never about, look at what I've done. It was about, what can we do for
Mhm.
people? It was always
Yeah.
we, by the way.
Yeah.
Always we.
Yeah.
Which means what you do is you get something started and then let the other people participate and get the blessing for doing it. Think about that. Think about you start some great thing and get it going, and then step back and let other people continue being blessed by their participation. Yeah, that's the Jesus model, people.
Jeff, what do you got?
Good morning. I'm almost presentable this morning. I heard something, and I believe it was concerning Paul's memory, and basically what I heard was guiding light, and that Paul had a guiding light and took that mantle on.
Oh, there we go. We're back. A few years ago, several guys had got together and started the World Inclusion Network website. And I remember being so eager to wait for them to set it up. When they set it up, I kept seeing Paul Gray's videos, and I was like, wow, every single time I see this guy, he's cheerful. And whatever thing he talks about, he always has a way of making it come across as if he's very cheerful to talk about it, no matter what it is. And I was like, this is a guy, I really like watching his videos. And then after a while, the website got taken down, and I was like, wow, I wonder if I can ever find that guy's videos anymore. I had a hard time remembering his name, and it turned out I was looking for another guy named Paul Gray. And then it came up on Facebook. I went on their search box, and it came up with Paul Gray's videos. I was like, I remember that guy. That's the guy whose videos I liked. I have got to get in his Facebook group. And then shortly after I got into the Facebook group is when he started saying he was going to start the Sunday morning Zoom calls. And I was like, I've got to send him an email. I got to get on this call. This is great. And that's how I got started here.
Yeah, something I remember, maybe kids to you probably are very well aware of it, but when Paul, whenever he starts with a video, he says, "Good day, everybody." I really miss that. You know, when he starts his videos, you hear that peculiar accent. Obviously, I've got a very peculiar one myself. So it just came to mind anyway.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know, that's interesting that you bring that up because Lenny was so kind. He captured that greeting and sent it to us for Paul's celebration of life. And I gave it to the people and they tested it before the service and it worked fine. But when this makes me emotional, when they played it or tried to play it for the service, it never came up. And that made me so sad, but it would have been just perfect. So Lenny, I don't know if I officially thanked you, but thank you so much. That was amazing. Just amazing. Melissa, we can't understand you. Oh, Lenny says still choppy.
Well, I hope you can all hear me and I'm not choppy. Are we good? I've probably told this story before, how we met Paul. We had just moved back to Lawrence. My wife, DeVelle, grew up in Lawrence. We just moved back to Lawrence. And we were had been to several churches and visited. I literally picked up the phone book one morning and went flipping through the phone, just going through the phone book, and found this church with the pastor's name was Paul Gray. And I said, "Hey, look, there's a church. The pastor's name is Paul Gray. You know, and my name's Gray. Our name's Gray. You know." And she said, "Oh, I know Paul Gray. He used to have a bar downtown and a nightclub downtown." And I'm like, "Yeah, we got to go to this church, you know." So we went, and the first week we were there, at that time they used this tool. Can you hear me now? At this time they were doing team teaching. And so the first week we went, he didn't teach. So we came back. He told us, met us at the door and said, "We'll come back," you know. So we came back. The second week we went, he didn't teach. And he met us at the door and said, "Well, I'm teaching next week, so if you don't come back after that, I'll know it's me." And so then we went back the third week, and it was all history after that. So it became part of the church, and I used to go when they had the clinic in the church. I used to go down there on the morning clinic and just or do pray with people came in and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how Paul and I got to be really good friends. We spent a lot of time together.
Mm-hmm. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and say something. I wanted to. Oh, Melissa, you want to go ahead?
No. Go ahead. Go ahead, and then I'll go.
Okay. Okay. Well, this has to do with Emily had talked about. Emily Mosher had talked about how Paul had helped them in several ways with their children, and you know, through all of these different things, you can look back and see the progress that God made, or what God did throughout the whole thing. And there was this one summer we thought we wanted to do pop-up churches, but we needed an RV. And we didn't have one. We didn't have any money for one. And we, Paul and I went to a basketball banquet honoring the KU basketball team, and he sat next to a man, and they, you know, Paul, he made instant friends with him. And so it turns out this man was very wealthy, and he had an RV that was sitting out somewhere, then he never used it anymore. And he said it was in really good shape. And Paul said, would you be willing to donate it to our church? And the guy said, sure. I mean, I'm, you know, paraphrasing, of course. And so, gosh, I think the guy lived in Texas. And so Paul and Stacy Belt flew down to wherever this was, and they got the RV and they drove it back through all kinds of challenges with it. Bad weather, the side mirrors falling off, trying to duct tape them, whatever, but whatever, the Lord protected them and brought them back. And so we had pop-up churches with that RV, and we had the children's ministry in the RV, and we went to different parks. Well, after that, we decided we didn't need that anymore. And so we were going to sell it. And I don't know if it was before we sold it or right after we sold it that he learned about Nick and Emily adopting Linger. And so he took that money and he gave that to them so they could bring Linger home. I mean, just seeing the Lord through it all. And if we can just do that with everything in our life, you know, just recognize, we may not see it at the time, but if we can recognize afterwards, during would be better, but afterwards that the Lord provided. I know I've shared with so many of you that the Lord gave me a song. Gotta get my tissue. A song when I was in the hospital with Paul, and the song is called Jireh. Jireh is the provider, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. And God does provide. He is our provider. And it says, whatever circumstance, that you are my provider. And he is. And it, you know, that's another great story to share that tells how he provided for Nick and Emily and the girls. And they're in the process of doing this again, actually. So anyway, I just wanted to share that part.
Thank you so much. Guys, I'm so sorry about all the technical problems. After trying a whole bunch of different things, simply changing which USB port I was plugged into is what worked. So computers. But I wanted to say a couple of things about Paul. Now I'm going to get emotional. I've known Paul and Kitsy for about 12 years, going on 13 years. And we picked the church pretty much the same way JL and DeVille did. We were looking through the phone book and they were close. And we just, I don't know, would like the sound of them. So we rode our bikes there. We didn't have a car at this time. So we rode our bikes there to try them out and were immediately struck by what a different vibe this church had. We were so welcomed, and so everybody was so friendly. And that was the beginning. Off and on over the years, I've worked for Paul. I've worked for him full-time, part-time, contract work, you name it, in so many different capacities as a volunteer sometimes. But it's been a long time since he could afford to, you know, the church could afford to have me as a full-time assistant. But I will tell you that anytime I was in a situation where money was low and I really needed some income, Paul always managed to find work for me and money to pay me, always just at the right time, right when I really needed it. So he took care of me a lot in that regard too. And the other thing that I would say about Paul is he's the first person in my life that made me believe that God loved me. And I don't mean, I mean that he, not in the obligatory, of course he loves me, he loves all his children, he has to, which is what I believed before. But he made me realize that God actually liked me, that he was fond of me and proud of me and wanted a relationship with me. So Paul, honestly is the first person in my life to open my eyes and my heart to that concept, that God wasn't just some strict parent figure that I had to please in order to have a good relationship with him, that he actually delighted in me. So I will be forever grateful to him for that. Who else?
I was on a podcast recently, and they asked me to talk about Epiphany. And I realized I've led an epiphany-driven life. And I only bring that up because one of the things that the Lord showed me about that was that He's constantly putting out these incredible ideas and incredible opportunities and phenomenal things if we're just listening. He's a constant sort of epiphany. Paul lived an epiphany-driven life, and he was listening all the time. I said on that call, it's like our soul is a receiver for the creativity of God, and everything I ever saw about Paul Gray was this constant stream of receiving. Joe talked a minute ago about Paul had no way of knowing that she was looking for something, but on the exact week that she needed something, there was Paul. Paul had a way. Paul was an inside trader, man. He was listening all the time. He was getting inside information from the Holy Spirit, and he was showing us a side of the Holy Spirit that has been camouflaged by other teachings. He was every good and perfect thing that's been said about Paul today. If he were here, he would say, well, that wasn't me, that was the Holy Spirit. Well, yeah, Paul, it was you listening to the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Boy, it was zero problem for Jesus to say to Paul, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Because that's who Paul was all the time, 24/7.
You know, he also had a, sorry.
I think Jesus said that to him constantly while he was still here.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked with God just like a friend, and that's how we're all supposed to. And he was the epitome of modeling that. And I just, it was extremely refreshing to me to be around him.
You know, when you're jamming with somebody and they play a really good lick, you say, yeah. And I just hear the Lord constantly in Paul's ear saying, yeah. Good lick, man. Yeah.
I was just going to add that he also had a way of making everybody around him feel seen and heard. You know, I mean, little things like he'd always say, oh, Melissa's got her hair down today, or Melissa's got her Chiefs shirt on today. He would make it a point to comment something to let me know that I was noticed every time, and not just me, but everybody else too.
Phil wants to say something.
You know, I've been in church most of my life, you know, and I've known a lot of pastors and, you know, had good relationships with them. But there was something very unique about Paul in the ministry. You know, Jill mentioned that we went to church and other people were speaking. Paul would share the pulpit. And he, like Melissa said, he seemed to respect and take notice and give, you know, he just shared love with everyone and never made, I don't believe he made anybody feel that they were not an important and maybe most important person. And he just, you know, lifted up and encouraged everyone, which is what I think we're really called to do. And he was unique in that as a pastor in the way that he handled it. And one of the things I really enjoyed about our church experience, especially early on, we were in a small group scenario, and I was sitting in this small group scenario one day, and we would have, you know, we'd read a book that would push us and challenge us maybe, and then we would discuss it. And around this table one day, I realized there were 12 people, and we were all from such vastly different backgrounds. We had people that had been missionaries. We had someone that was an atheist that had almost a Damascus, Paul kind of experience and came to the Lord on the way to some sort of satanic or something kind of, you know, he told the story about, you know, he was on his way someplace and got stopped on the road and just had an experience with the Lord. You know, either people that were new to the Lord or people that had been with him, walked for years and years. And he would pull us all together and we could have a discussion and visit without offense and just growing in the knowledge of the Lord, of the love of Jesus. And to me, it was like a signature kind of thing to just spread the love of Jesus and the knowledge of the growing love of Jesus and this whole grace experience with Paul. And it was fantastic. And it is, like somebody else said, it's Johnny Appleseed. He planted a seed, and those seeds do not go void because the Spirit just continues to nurture. And he's done it all over the world with all kinds of walks of people. And I treasure it.
Anybody else?
I could always come up with a few different stories. It's interesting, after Brother Paul passed away last year, about a month or two after that, I was feeling really sad about it because most of my family really doesn't understand my beliefs in a loving God, and their behavior has been quite negative towards it, actually. And when I met Paul, it was almost like one of the best father figures I've ever had in my life, really. And when he was gone, it just made me so sad. I was just like, do I have to go back to the way it's been for the last 15 years where almost everybody in my life hates me? And I am so glad to have all of you folks here, because most of my old family and friends don't really care to be around me because they don't believe in a loving God. But it was interesting. One day I was on my job refurbishing a house, and I was standing in a room all by myself, and I felt so sad that Paul had passed away. I was almost about to cry. And I thought I heard somebody walk up behind me, and I thought I felt somebody's arm across my shoulder like they were hugging me. And I turned around to see who it was, and there was nobody there. And it was almost like the Holy Spirit was suddenly speaking to my heart saying, this isn't necessarily a time to be sad. This is a time to rejoice for all those people that came into your life and showed you God's love, like Paul and like all those other authors that wrote those books about God's love that you read. Because you know Paul is rejoicing because he sees it face to face now.
That is beautiful, Lenny. I'm so happy for you that you had that experience. Just amazing. God is so good.
What's interesting is a few months later, I started feeling a little sad about the situation again. And after I got off of work, I went into a local fast food restaurant to get some lunch. And I saw a guy who looked identical to Paul Gray when he was a young man with dark hair. And I was like, I had to look with my glasses, and without my glasses, I was like, that cannot possibly be Paul Gray because he's gone. And I even got a picture of the guy, but it didn't show up good. The guy's picture looked like it was about 1/8 of an inch tall. And I was like, but that sure does look exactly like the old picture of him with the rest of the Gaslight Band. When he had the dark hair and the dark mustache, looked identical to him. And I was like, God, I guess that's you once again telling me I don't need to be sad. This is a time to rejoice for all those who have brought love into our lives. And it just happened this weekend again, too. That's when yesterday I brought up the Facebook or YouTube page. And one of the first videos on there is a video by Paul Gray. It says, Meeting Jesus Face to Face. It was the title of the video. And I was like, isn't that what we're supposed to be talking about tomorrow?
Wow.
Sometimes these things just happen.
Wow. Joe, did you?
Okay, I wasn't going to share this. Can everyone hear me okay? I've got my earphones in. Yeah. But Lenny's made me feel brave. So about a few days before Paul went into hospital, and presumably, I'm guessing he was in a ton of pain, but to think of me and send me a message. And he said, look, Joe, I think I've had a vision of you bringing this message of God's love to the UK. And I freaked out going like, how can I do that? Like, how, why? This is amazing, but I'm scared. And so I thought, well, okay, my music. And if you see the timeline, I have started uploading regularly because of what he said. And if he hadn't have said that, I don't think I would have done it. And I don't know, perhaps my brain is making more of this, but on the day of Paul's funeral, I had I never ever get this. I got a whole download of a song, and I can send you the link. It's called The Love of God. All the words just came. It was literally like, I just sat there and I just kind of was in some kind of flow that has never happened, and it hasn't happened since. And it turned out to be word for word one of his videos that I hadn't watched yet. And I can remember Paul talking about the cloud of witnesses, and I just thought, I wonder. And now I listen back to that song, and it just has Paul's hallmark all over it. So I don't know what happened that morning. Literally in the space of an hour, a whole song in all the chords, all the words, everything. It was quite remarkable. And then to discover it was word for word. His title was something like The Love of God as well. It was bizarre, and I can't make any sense of it. And I don't know what to make of it. But okay, I don't know. Maybe I will be used to bring love to the UK through my music. That would be amazing. But again, it's Paul's just kind of, and the whole attention to detail. I can remember I text the women's group. I was up at 3 a.m. So for the ladies in America, it would be sort of very late evening. I was looking after my niece, and I was up in the middle of the night, and I was texting, and we're all laughing, saying, what are you doing up at? And Kitsy, you must have mentioned it to Paul, and I'd only recently joined the group, and he'd mentioned something about the wee hours of the night, and he said, oh, Joe knows all about that because she's often up at 3 a.m. And it meant so much to me. It was that little attention to detail of like, oh, you've remembered. And somehow this new girl who's joined the group is important enough to, I don't know, it was a silly little thing, but it meant so much.
That is just beautiful.
It
I just
is.
love that. Oh my. And you know, these, how do I say this? These things that happen to us, I think we should really realize that God is with us all the time, and He's doing these things to bless us and to help us remember He's here, and to walk through our grief. It's okay to grieve. I am not a big, well, you wouldn't believe this, but I wouldn't. I with my grieving, I didn't have many really crying moments, and one of them was just last week, when I remembered to listen when I listened to Jira again. But it's just, He is with us all the time and loving us all the time. Is just amazing, and he just wants us to know that. And it's great to share these things. My grieving is keeping real busy, and but every now and then I get a feeling inside that I've never had before until Paul passed away. And I'm thinking maybe that's some grief I need to pay attention to. And it's okay. It's okay to do that. However you grieve, it's okay. And just know that the Lord is with you. And isn't that a wonderful thing? He never leaves us, and He's always loving us. So I just wanted to encourage all of you with that.
I'd like to jump in here if I may. Paul was part of a group of pastors back around 2000, maybe a little preceding that were trying to, and you can fill in the details, Kitsy, if it's important or pertinent. And the church that I was in, I was some kind of a mid-level person that had responsibilities directly in the church for facilities. And among other things, I'd worn a lot of hats there, but I was aware of this group because of comments and things that had been shared by the pastor of the church I was in. And he never came across to me, this pastor, that he was really on board with this group, and specifically because it affiliated or touched all these other groups that he wasn't sure he wanted to be affiliated with. This was my pastor. But Paul seemed to be able to, in this group, bring everybody on board. And so he was kind of a reluctant on board pastor within this group. And I thought, well, I thought of the scripture that said, if you put your hand to the plow, don't look back. But that was my first impression of Paul by name. And then actually met him in 2000 when he was doing a remodel on the Heartland Church on Vermont. And I had a small part in that, or my company did. And I got a sense of him and just his infectious personality, and at that time. And then around 2012, I was looking for a church, and I guess he was out at Steve's place at the time, and I don't think he was preaching the day I went out there, JL. Somebody else was, but it was just this. There was a vibe or an atmosphere that I thought, this is good. This is good. I feel and sense a responsiveness to the Holy Spirit, and but that's just kind of my short background with him. But he was an influencer. Before grace, God smacked him, and us all as a consequence. And so, and someone who could see the benefit of unity. And I'm telling you, in the religious world, that's just not a thing. It's lip service to it, but it's not heart. It's not a givenness to it. And Paul had a givenness to it. He had a genuine givenness to the unity of what and the heart of God about that.
Oh, he was a huge encourager to everybody. I know that. He and I would meet at least once a week. We had a set time that we met for coffee once a week, and once in a while I would have an idea or something, and Paul would be like, "Let's do it. Let's do it." And so he just always encouraging to move forward with ideas that he felt like God. We felt like God was giving us, and he's been. It's always been that big encourager, and it's helped me a lot in the interim time and time. Now that I can feel that encouragement even from him now through the great cloud of witnesses. How I see it, and I appreciate that so much from him. Stan, what do you got?
I remember once sharing with Paul some experiences that I had as a kid growing up as a Black person. And I remember he responded that he could never know what it was that I, had to deal with. But I really had a sense that he heard my heart, that he saw me and that he heard me. And that was something that, I'll never forget.
I'm going to follow that up, and then you can go next, Philip. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
You just reminded me, Stan, of I got a similar reaction. I'm not going to go much into it, but most of you know already that I have a background in substance abuse, that I've been in recovery for several years now. I've got several years of clean time. But back when I first went to rehab, and I went for an extended time, like 3 months, I got that same, he reacted that way to my issues too. He said he might not understand what it feels like, but to be, struggling with addiction, but he didn't judge me. He didn't, and I got the sense that he really cared and wanted to help. But he and Kitsy, I've got to tell you guys, they were amazing. They visited me. They sent me, all the women sent me cards. They came, Paul and Kitsy came to my graduation, and they found out, they gave me a gift of a book called Jesus Calling. And my roommate got to look at it and really liked it. So I told them that, and they brought not only a copy for her, they brought a case full of, a whole case of Jesus Calling books, and gave them out to all the women there that wanted one. And oh my gosh, these women were so grateful. So that's just what kind of people they are. Not only did they not judge me, they were right there on board to jump in and help in any way they could, I guess is what All right, Philip, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful to obviously to Paul for what I've experienced, what I've mentioned before, but I've also I've come out of my loneliness through Paul's intervention, I would say. I like that word intervention between inverted commas, because it's kind of the Holy Spirit's work, I would say. But Paulo invited me a few months ago to go to a seminar done by John Crowder. It was about 2 to 3 weeks ago. And there's one group of people meeting in another city or town here and they have once a month a grace evening. Now it's a home-based network. They don't operate with in an institutional model at all. Everyone's a brother or sister. It's it's like I'm thinking, well, this is it, because I really thought it would be difficult to meet people here, but the doors are just opening. It's gradual, and so I'm very grateful for the door that's been opened by Paul. Because I felt, well, if this is not going to happen, I'm just going to either lose my faith or be a hypocrite. But I'm not going back to the institutional model ever again. So I'm just so grateful to obviously to God, but it's through the work, the intervention of Paul.
Amen. Go ahead.
Well, it's not very easy to talk about Paul because he's, I consider him a mentor, a spiritual father, and one of my spiritual exercises daily for the 3 last years is reading, starting the day with notes from Papa. And so daily Paul starts or helps me start the day, and spiritually he's really what I needed, and I still do, and is a part of this big bouquet of flowers that God gives us. There are spiritual fathers and brothers like all of you, and I think not making myself a victim, but I'm maybe the most lonesome person of the group here in Luxembourg, where I've searched and I'm still searching for other people where I can connect, and I still haven't found any. The closest is Philip in Holland, where I was there with him 3 weeks ago. But well, God has his purposes, and it's not in our time, but he knows what we can handle, and Paul is really, he gives us hope. Paul is a joyful and hopeful, and is really a unique, and especially his humility is somebody that he touches our lives. He touched my life, and I've got no doubt that really it's what God that brought him to me, and through Mike Ruff in California that also has gone, and it's really, for me, you are the connection that I have with other faces, with other people, that we share the same belief, the same faith, and so it's great.
I appreciate everybody being on today and what everybody said. And the way we've all been affected by Paul and his ministry, and by God and the grace that he gives us, and the opening of our eyes, some of us through Paul's ministry. And
Jerry, I can't hear you. I don't think the others can either.
Yeah, you started breaking up and then went silent. Hey, listen, guys, it's about that.
Mindful of everybody's time. We'll go on from there.
Yep, that's what I was about to say. It's about that time. Does anybody have any last things?
I think what?
these things.
Okay, yeah.
You're close to Melissa thought she was.
Well, let's ask God for God's blessing. Father, thank you so much for the time that we've spent with our friend Paul Gray, and your love poured through him like a funnel. Lord, we just thank you for his influence on each and every one of us. Thank you for your love for us and your grace and mercy and abundance and provision, everything that you are. Thank you for allowing us to get together and discuss about things and talk about things that matter to us and that matter to you, and just praise you for who you are. Thank you again in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Love you all. Anybody else?
Love you. Safe travels.
Love you back.
Yeah, love you all. See you
Love
next
you
time.
all too. Thanks for this morning.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Um,